first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs.
While US allies scramble, China holds its ground. As global markets reel and nations scramble to strike tariff deals with Washington, one country is digging in its heels. China is not just refusing to fold under pressure from the United States President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs. It's actively positioning itself as a counterforce, a steady hand in what it calls an era of unilateral bullying.
美方滥施关税，严重侵犯各国的正当权益，严重违反世界贸易组织规则，严重损害以规则为基础的多边贸易体制，严重冲击全球的经济秩序稳定，是典型的单边主义、保护主义经济霸凌，遭到国际社会普遍反对。中方对此强烈谴责，坚决反对。我要再次强调，贸易战、关税战没有赢家，保护主义没有出路。中国人不惹事，也不怕事。施压、威胁和讹诈不是同中方打交道的正确方式。中方必将采取必要措施，坚决维护自身正当合法权益。我想，美方的所作所为没有体现出想要认真对话的意愿。美方如果真的想谈，就应该拿出平等、尊重、互惠的态度。如果美方置两国和国际社会的利益于不顾，执意打关税战、贸易战，中方必将奉陪到底。
Within just 48 hours of Trump's dramatic announcement imposing aggressive tariffs across the globe, Beijing struck back with its own punitive tariffs on American goods and firms. And when Trump, never one to de-escalate, doubled down on Monday with threats of even more tariffs, Beijing once again returned fire, at least verbally. In a defiant statement, China's Ministry of Commerce declared, and I quote, "The US threat to escalate tariffs on China is a mistake on top of a mistake. It exposes once again the blackmailing nature of the United States." The Chinese government made it clear, if Washington wants a showdown, it will get one. It further stated China will never accept it. If the US insists on its own way, China will fight to the end. This isn't bluster. China's defiance seems calculated, which is a message aimed at both its domestic population and international observers. The goal? To show strength, stability, and readiness. The Communist Party's mouthpiece, People's Daily, ran a front-page commentary declaring that, I quote, "US tariffs will have an impact, but the sky won't fall." In other words, calm down, we have been through worse. The editorial argued that since the United States initiated its first trade war in 2017, China has kept moving forwards, progressing despite pressure. It credited the strong leadership of the Communist Party and China's institutional advantages for its resilience and declared the country sure to turn crisis into opportunity. So what's Trump's latest volley? An additional 34% tariff on all Chinese goods entering the United States, bringing total duties above 54% once existing measures are included. Beijing didn't blink. Instead, it imposed a matching 34% tariffs on all American imports and rolled out export controls on rare earth minerals and restrictions on specific United States companies. Then came Monday's threat. Trump promised a further 50% tariff increase midweek if China didn't back off its retaliatory measures by Tuesday. Oh, and the requested meetings Beijing asked for, obviously cancelled. It was a diplomatic read my lips moment. Behind the scenes, the calculation from Beijing and perhaps from President Xi Jinping himself seems to be that Trump's strategy could ultimately backfire on Washington. After all, disruptions of global trade could hurt US consumers and industries more than they hurt China, whose economy is increasingly reoriented inwards. This idea is reflected in Beijing's subtle messaging to allies, companies, and domestic citizens. We are the stable one here. To reinforce that image, China's foreign ministry released a statement over the weekend, and I quote, "As the world's second largest economy and consumer market, China will continue to open its doors wider regardless of the changing international landscape." As if to prove the point, Ling Ji, who's a vice minister at China's Commerce Ministry, hosted executives from 20 United States companies, including Tesla and GE Healthcare. His pitch: China is an ideal, safe, and promising place for investment. He called on American businesses to be rational voices and help maintain global supply chain stability. In short, if your president won't chill, maybe you will. Of course, not everyone trusts Beijing's sudden embrace of globalization and open markets. China has had a long history of using its massive domestic market as leverage against countries that offend it politically. Still, US allies and rivals alike are now facing tariffs themselves and may have little choice but to look towards Beijing. China held economic talks last month with Japan and South Korea, both slapped with over 24% tariffs, as well as with the European Union, which got hit with 20% duties. And in Southeast Asia, countries that are supposed to benefit from trade diversification away from China are instead watching the tariff war punch them in the face. Singapore's Prime Minister Lawrence Wong didn't sugarcoat it at all. He said, and I quote, "This marks a seismic change in the global order. The era of rules-based globalization and free trade is over."
In Singapore's case, we have an FTA with America. We impose zero tariffs on US imports, and we actually run a trade deficit with the US, meaning we buy more from them than they do from us. If the tariffs were truly reciprocal, and if they were meant to target only those with trade surpluses, then the tariff for Singapore should be zero. But still, we are being subjected to the 10% tariff. We are very disappointed by the US move, especially considering the deep and long-standing friendship between our two countries. These are not actions one does to a friend. If other countries adopt the same approach as the US, the rules-based trading system will unravel.
To be clear, Beijing knows that this won't be painless. United States-China trade last year hit nearly $500 billion. That's a big pie to mess with. China's economy has only recently begun to recover from its property market meltdown, high government debt, and the long hangover from its zero-COVID lockdowns. With its growth still fragile, the government last month announced sweeping new policies to boost domestic consumption. According to People's Daily, China would now vigorously boost domestic consumption with extraordinary efforts and introduce a series of reserve policies as appropriate. So yes, they are bracing but not begging. Unlike in the United States, China's Communist Party doesn't have to worry about voter backlash. There are no opinion polls that matter, no midterms to fret over. This gives Beijing more breathing room in how much economic pain it can stomach in the short term. And that's what makes this trade war so unpredictable. Both sides believe they have the upper hand. Neither side wants to blink first, and both believe they can outlast the other. As the tariffs ratchet higher, the world watches, stuck between two economic giants, both determined not to flinch. For more updates on Trump's reciprocal tariffs and China's retaliatory tariffs and its impact on the geoeconomics across the globe, stay tuned to the official YouTube channel of the Indian Express.